This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to talk about a boogie woogie, and I'm going to play one.
I'm Steve Vinson.
I'm Paul Schultz.
And this is the Don't Panic Radio Show. Sit back, relax, and ignore the news. Nothing you're about to hear is true.
Now here's something we hope you'll really like.
Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us. How you doing, Paul?
I'm doing pretty good. How you doing?
Doing good. I think we finished eating all the turkey for Thanksgiving. Took us like 4 days.
I just finished off the last of the taco salad. I'm down to that. I think there's some onions left.
Taco salad for Thanksgiving?
It's a side dish. My mom likes it, so she makes it.
Were there Mexicans this far north?
Yeah,
on the first Thanksgiving?
Indians. They were called Indians. Watch John Leguizamo's what was it, Latino History for Morons. They were Mexicans.
The Indians were?
Yeah. Most of the Mexicans in the United States are 40% Indian.
Well, yeah, but the we could have a whole show on the Mexica and the Mayans and the Incas and the Aztecs and well, you know, I don't know why. Well, I do know why, because our the history that we learned in school sucked. But
yeah,
I never even gave it a thought that like Spanish people are white,
yeah,
and Hispanics are brown, right?
Right.
And I never stopped to wonder until I got into some super racist conversation with somebody about how it's because Mexicans are poor and they work outside a lot, and so they get really tan. And I'm like, I don't think that. Not all of them. I mean, there are rich Mexicans. Well, yeah, but it's in their genetics because historically. And I'm like, wait a minute, you can't pass on a suntan in your genes.
At least it might. I mean, not so soon. I mean, eventually, maybe, but not. You know. But seriously, you should check out Latin History for Morons. It's
all right. I'm on it.
It's entertaining and eye-opening.
What a top.
Today's show is not about Mexico or Mexicans or Hispanics or even Indians. Today, as promised, we're going to get into the passing of Stan Lee, but even more important, the impact his life had on one of your hosts and a whole generation of similar folks. So we'll get into that in a minute. What was I talking about? Oh, taco. You threw me off with the taco salad. I'm like, we just finished off the turkey. You're like, oh yeah, we just had a little taco salad left. I'm like, that's not a Thanksgiving thing.
That was to illustrate that I'm down to the last of it. You know.
Oh, okay, got it.
The vegetable pizza was gone like the first day.
So thanks everybody for the great feedback on the softcore history show.
Right.
Paul worked really hard on that one.
Well, so did you.
Yeah, a little bit. We enjoyed doing it, and thanks for sharing it. By the way, we're gonna actually make a version that we could enter a contest with and share widely on history forums and stuff like that.
I think it's one of our most shared episodes, honestly.
We like that.
Mm-hmm.
Keep doing that.
Is this what it takes? Are you not entertained?
Are you not entertained? Well, it just means we have to work hard for our listeners, because we don't ask for much. We just ask for their praise and adulation.
That's all.
Okay. Well, without further ado, did you have any more ado before we?
No, I drank all my dew. I'm all out of dew.
Perfect. All right. Well, recently, at the age of 95, comic book legend. I think it's fair to call him a legend.
It's transcending comic book legend.
Yeah. Stan Lee passed away at 95. I mean, I know this one hit hard for a lot of people. As I said on social media, never was a comic book guy despite your best efforts. But
I could have tried harder.
But a lot of people who I hold very dear held Stan Lee very dear, and I know this one hurts more than most. So thought we'd dedicate a show to Mr. Lee and his life and his influence. Starting with, I was going to say yours truly, but it would be yours truly. Not my truly, but yours.
well, the opposite of yours truly would be my truly. So.
Right, so my truly, my dear friend Paul Schultz. So what does Stan Lee mean to you personally, and what are your personal interactions with the man?
It's almost impossible to measure the impact, both directly and indirectly, that he's had on not just comic books, but entertainment around the world and people around the world. The people that he, lifted up, the people that he, started the careers of. We the Tony Isabella episode, he mentions going to work for the guy. It's just it's almost impossible to measure his impact. For instance, like Spider-Man. Everybody knows Spider-Man. Literally everyone knows Spider-Man. Spider-Man is, I read an article somewhere where he is one of the 3 most identifiable fictional characters around the world. The other 2 are Mickey Mouse and Robin Hood. Believe it or not, Robin Hood made the cut.
Wow.
You could show some guy in a mud hut in the middle of Africa Spider-Man's head, and they would know it was Spider-Man. It's that he's that well known.
I heard that guy that tried to preach Jesus to those islanders and got killed. I heard they threw pictures of Spider-Man at the guy.
If he would have just come there bearing the image of Spider-Man, he might not be in the shape he's in.
To be clear, just for people who are as ignorant as I am, I believe I know the answer to this, but there may be some who don't. So Stan Lee, what was his role in creating Spider-Man?
Stan Lee created Spider-Man, essentially.
So when you thank you for repeating my question in the form of a statement.
Hey, I was just helping my daughter do her homework, and we had to do that. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So the process of creating a comic book character, obviously there's a book involved. Someone, if I understand just from listening to you correctly, somebody comes up with a story idea and some character ideas. They kind of write those out, and they may talk to an artist about it.
Yes. Yeah.
And then an artist will create some sample sketches of what that character might look like.
Right.
The creator or the writer and the artist will collaborate and decide, yes, that's what we want that character to look like. Then if I understand correctly, the writer then will write a story in the form of, like, here's how this will lay out as a story.
Yeah, like
panel
a movie script almost.
Yeah, like that's probably where storyboards came from. It's probably from comic books, right?
I wouldn't be surprised.
And so the artist then takes what the author wrote and then draws the scenes in the panels, and then somebody will come in and write the words in the bubbles or wherever the words go, right?
It's called lettering, yes.
So in all of that, that whole process, which one was Stan Lee?
He was the creator. He came up with the concept. He bounced it off a couple of artists. He found the one that he liked, and they went with it. And he basically wrote every issue of Spider-Man for like 100 or so issues. I mean, I'm. What's funny is I'm talking about Spider-Man. I'm not the biggest Spider-Man fan, but I'm pretty sure it's at least 100 issues he wrote before he turned the reins over to somebody else. So he would come up with the storyline. He'd give the storyline to the artist. The artist would then draw it out, and then he'd go in and, he would then write the dialogue, and which is turned over to the letterer and the colorist and all that.
So that helps, because I know those of you, ass deep in the industry, that just, you already know all that, right?
It's like the conversation I had with my little brother about an eye doctor. He called me up one day, and he's like, he was wanting to know if I had any to recommend, so I recommended mine. And then he goes, so what should I expect when I go in there? And I was like, oh, you've never been to one. I've been going to them I've known about this stuff since I was 3 years old. Yeah. It was totally foreign to me. I had no idea what to expect. Sometimes I take that for granted that not everybody knows.
I like to think of it that way. Like you're when you're telling a story, or you're like trying to relate some new concept to somebody. Mm-hmm. Remember we were in school? I don't know if you remember doing this, but we had to describe how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so people would say, well, you take the peanut butter and you put it on the bread, and then and the teacher would be like, were you going to open the jar first?
You're just going to put the jar right on top of the bread.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, open the jar, and then you put the peanut butter on it with your hand? Oh, no, you have to get a knife out of the drawer, and so, so it's like dumbing it down. So I appreciate that. I'm sure we have more than one listener who, when you say Stan Lee created Spider-Man, they're picturing Stan Lee sat down and drew Spider-Man, right? When he didn't draw Spider-Man, he created the concept of Spider-Man, found an artist to do the drawing part, and somebody else to do the inking part, which is what they call coloring.
Inking is the black stuff. Coloring is called coloring.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Whew, see? After all these years, I still don't know this stuff. Okay, so he created Spider-Man. What else?
Well, oh God, who didn't he create? The Fantastic Four, the Incredible Hulk, Thor, Daredevil, Iron Man, the X-Men, Doctor Strange, She-Hulk.
So let's get back to your narrative. Mm-hmm. You were talking about he created Spider-Man. Mm-hmm. Go on from there.
The reason why I say you have to have been living under a rock to not know who he is. I did some quick math prepping for the show, and okay, not everybody reads comics. In fact, comics are at an almost all-time historical low in readership right now. But Marvel's movies, which started about 2000 with, I think, the first X-Men movie, from then till now, the Marvel movies, just in the box office, I'm not talking about DVDs and renting and all that, just in the box office, they've made conservatively $14 billion.
That's billion with a B.
It's a billion with a B. That's almost $1 billion a year if you think about it. Yeah, give or take. So everybody knows who these characters are. They might not have read the comics, but everybody knows who these characters are. But like I said, it's difficult. I don't remember a world without him. My own story is not unique. I started reading comics in like 4th grade because D loaned me a bunch of his comics that he got from his brother, and when I gave them back to him, I was like, I just incessantly bugged my mom and dad to go. I wanted more, so they went out and they'd start buying them for me and stuff like that. I was hooked from then on. It was a whole thing for me. Now, about the time I was 12 years old was when I decided that's what I wanted to do for a living, was draw comics. So everything I did from that point on was to learn the lingo, learn the history, learn the techniques, to be able to look like I knew what I was doing drawing comic books. And funny thing though, I got to thinking about this. I started reading them in about the 4th grade. At that point in time, the Marvel Universe as we know it, which is the company, was only about 14 years old.
Oh, wow.
It's like, Okay, I've been out of school 30 years, so that's less than half as long as I've been out of school. And Andy's brother had all these great old books, and we read them and ruined them, and they'd be worth a fortune now. So anybody that has expensive comics because of the shortage of old books, you're welcome.
Uh-huh.
But anyway, about 12 years old, it was when I decided I wanted to become a comic book artist. And eventually that happened. I started working with some people like Officer Nick and Mike Indovina, who we've talked about on the show a lot. And about 5 years ago, this is when I was doing the Serial Squad comic that people might remember. I was doing a comic book convention in Pittsburgh. It's a great show. It's a really good show to do. And Stan Lee was the guest of honor at this thing. And what was so funny was they came over the PA system when he arrived. They're like, it's like the Elvis thing. Ladies and gentlemen, Stan Lee has entered the building. And everybody gets up and we're applauding, And I looked at Mike, who was at my table with me. And I'm like, dude, I expect him to be like, shh. Just come, flying over over all the displays, waving at people, But, he was there as the guest of honor, and you could pay a certain amount of money and get your picture taken with them, a meet and greet, they called them, And they were the tickets were kind of dicey, but it's how often do you meet a living legend? Well, my publisher told me that they were doing this auction for I can't remember what the charity was for. It was a local charity, and he's like, "There's a lot of big name people that are putting stuff in here. Why don't you it would behoove you? Why don't you put something in this? One, you're donating to charity. Two, you're getting your name mixed in there with some of these big name guys." And I'm like, okay, so I pulled something out of one of my portfolios, and that's what I submitted. And they invited us.
What was it?
It was this picture of the Rocketeer that I had done for fun, and I liked it. I was proud of it, so I thought, well, this will everybody knows everybody who's in the business knows who Rocketeer is.
Is that a Marvel character?
Marvel wants to say it's a Marvel character, but no, it is not. It's an independent book.
Okay.
My publisher then tells me, he's like, well, we can go to this auction now, and Stan Lee is going to be the officiator of it. It was a silent auction, and it was that night. I'm like, okay, that's cool, because there's the chance there that I might run into him, So we get to the auction, and it's not black tie or anything, but it's pretty formal. There's all the groups of people that are all like hanging out with each other and stuff, and I was introduced to a bunch of people that who are now still good friends of mine, and I'm happy to say that my Rocketeer piece went for a lot more than I thought it was, and was comparably priced to some of the other big name stuff. So I felt pretty good about myself. I was riding a pretty good wave.
How much did it go for?
It went for $150.
Nice.
Yeah, and some of the stuff was going for like some of the artists, some of the big name artists were like double that, But considering the amount of time I'd been doing my thing and the amount of time they'd been doing their thing, I was riding a pretty good wave.
Yeah.
And it was open bar.
Oh, well, there you go.
So, so I'm with this group of people, and everybody's introducing everybody. And you know how it is when you're at a party and you're in a group of people that, everybody's introducing everybody, and then eventually you find yourself standing there and there's like maybe one or two other people with you, Well, there was this awkward moment because I'm standing here, talking to this girl that I was in this group, and she was telling me about how she was there because she was helping her brother who he was this really great artist, and she was there for moral support. And I was like, oh yeah, that's cool, and then it happened. They announced, Stan comes into the room. He presents this big check to the lady that runs the show, and talks for a while, and then if you were quick enough, as he was leaving, he'd shake your hand and stuff. Well, I didn't get close enough to actually meet him, but I felt pretty good about myself because I was in a room with a guy who is the reason why all of us do what we do. I didn't have to pay to see him, and I made money for a charity with him. So I felt pretty good about myself. So he leaves, and the party keeps going, and the drinks are flowing, and people are being, they all got their human suits on. They're being all like civilized and stuff. And I'm back talking to this girl, and she's like looking like she doesn't even want to be in her own skin.
She didn't like her human suit.
Yeah, she didn't like her human suit. She looks at me and she goes, "Do you want to come out in the parking lot and smoke a joint with me?" And I just said, "I would like nothing more." So we split. We go out into we leave the convention center where it's nighttime. There's a parking lot full of cars and whatnot, and we end up, we find they got all the U-Hauls are all parked at the back of the parking lot. So we found one, opened it up, climbed inside. She's got her phone, and she's doing the light thing. I got some of those blanket things that they have in the U-Haul trucks for fragile stuff, and we're sitting on them.
Just smoke the joint?
Yeah, well, she lights up, and we're talking, and then she hands it over to me, and I'm like, "Mm-mm." And she's like, "What?" I said, "I want a shotgun." She's like, "Oh, I see where this is going." So
Little sister shotgun.
So, okay, apparently she has some sort of like pain medication or whatever she was on. So she was getting like the severe medicinal stuff. I took 2 hits off of this thing and it turned into like a psychedelic Austin Powers moment. Everything was just, you were here, I was hearing like scimitars and there was the weird lights and stuff. And next thing I know, we're rolling around in this U-Haul, and then like out of nowhere, I don't know how long, it could have been 30 seconds, it could have been an hour and a half, because when you're high, time is relative. Time doesn't exist. Ask the guru. Anyway, she's like, "Oh, my brother. Oh, my God. I got to get back in there. My brother. Oh, no." I'm like, okay, clearly she's sobered up and she's experiencing buyer's remorse. So,
Of course. Because it's not actually her brother that she's thinking of. Like, your brain just automatically goes, "Yep, has nothing to do with her brother. It's me."
Yeah. So we go back inside and she goes off and hangs out with her brother, and I go with my publisher and some friends, and we go out, have a good time. Well, the next day, I come walking in, and Mike's looking at me. He's like, he just knows something's going on by the look on my face. He's like, "What?" I said, "Do me a favor, go down the aisle and around over there to so and so's table, because last night I ended up making out with her, with his sister, and I want to make sure if I have anything to be embarrassed about." He's like, "Oh, okay." So he gets up.
Or if she has something to be embarrassed
Yeah,
about.
right,
I want
exactly.
to gauge who should be more embarrassed.
He gets up, walks around, comes back, sits down, looks at me and goes, "Nope."
He's like, her on the other hand.
Well, when I said earlier that it's impossible to gauge the impact and influence that Stan Lee has had on, comics and the world in general, none of that would have happened if not for Stan Lee.
You're my boy, Stan.
Change the channel, Marge.
That's quite a story.
It was quite a weekend.
All right. So he creates Spider-Man. He almost gets you laid.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking,
I mean, how else in my lifetime am I ever going to be able to say Stan Lee got me laid? It's just
Well, now it would be weird if he did.
yeah, that's true. Yeah,
Although, I have heard some people do pretty well at funerals, but I guess you probably missed that
Yeah.
opportunity. But I was thinking about him being the creator of these characters, and you were talking about Marvel movies, and there's merch, there's games, there's comic books are a particular medium for creating characters and telling stories, right? And they were created during a time when they were one of the only ways to tell that kind of story and to create those kinds of characters.
yeah,
Without, people going, God, that looks fake, right?
yeah,
And so now, with CGI and with expensive movie budgets and games and all that stuff, there are a ton of other ways to tell those stories and create those characters. So it's interesting that comic book, like you were saying, comic books readership is at an all-time low, but Marvel Studios is making money hand over fist. Well, it makes total sense because people still like those characters and those stories, right? They consume them differently.
yeah.
But, which is, again, everybody who's ever seen a Marvel movie saw Stan Lee make an appearance.
And,
right?
and,
Did
and
his
almost
famous
every
cameo.
single one. Yeah.
Yeah, he does his famous cameo. People who know who he is have fun going, oh, yeah, that's Stan Lee. And people who don't know who he is learn who he is.
Yep.
Like, well, who is that? Well, he created the characters. Well, the thing is, instead of me guessing, I'll ask you, because maybe you know. How did he feel about the fact that comic book readership was way down, but movies and games and merch and all that was way up? I believe that he was probably just fine with it.
I don't think he cared so much, honestly.
Especially since he was a character creator and a storyteller. Right? He wasn't a comic book guy.
Right. No, he wanted to be a novelist.
Well, sure. That's another way to tell stories and create characters, right? But either he couldn't write a novel, or couldn't get somebody to pay him to write a novel, or
Essentially, yeah. Nobody was buying books back then, and comics were his day job.
yeah, they were paying the bills, right? People were reading comics. So if he were starting his career today, I bet he would be a playwright. I mean, a screenwriter
Yeah. Yeah.
or a producer.
Yeah, and he loved the idea that well, how to put this? In his opinion, his books and comics in general couldn't be created until now to look and feel the way the books do, thanks to technology.
Yeah.
So it was like the perfect time for them to happen.
Yeah. So why is Stan Lee the man? I mean, there's a whole other comic book universe out there, DC, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure they had, like, you said the top 3 most recognizable characters are Spider-Man, Robin Hood, and who was the other one?
Mickey Mouse.
Mickey Mouse. You didn't even mention Superman,
Right.
right? Don't you think more people would know who Superman is than Spider-Man?
I think people would know the symbol was Superman, but as far as like a headshot, nah.
Ah, I gotcha.
He's just a guy.
Superman looks a lot of different ways,
Yeah.
right? It's
Yeah.
kind of his mystique. He was just regular guy.
Yeah.
Okay, so Superman, huge,
Yeah.
right? Wonder Woman, huge.
Mm-hmm.
So who created Wonder Woman and Superman?
Well, Siegel and Schuster created Superman, and William Moulton Marsden created Wonder Woman with the help of his wife and his and their significant other.
So is that what makes Stan? Because you just mentioned like 4 different people. Is that what makes Stan Lee so unique? Is that he created all these characters, where over at DC it was more of a committee?
No, I think I think. See, the history of comics is a it's like almost 100 years worth of history, and it's kind of convoluted in the beginning. But what separated Stan Lee and Marvel from DC, DC was the big gun at that time. What separated them was Marvel created comics for college kids, because walking around on campuses, he noticed that a lot of these kids were reading comics. DC was writing comics primarily for 7-year-olds. So he wanted to write more realistic stories, more realistic characters who have more flaws than virtues, those kind of stories. There was none up until then.
So is that why he's the man? I mean,
yeah, because those stories resonated with the older crowd, caught on. Who has the money? The older people have the older kids, have the money. They buy more books, and his stories weren't, they're corny by today's standards, but the morals behind them and the plots and the messages and all that are pretty universal. But they were just so head and shoulders above what DC was doing that they launched a whole. They then DC had to go, oh shit, because they were lagging behind. So then they had to up their game and make their stories a little more adult accessible.
Yeah. So let's talk about death for a second.
Okay.
I wonder what it is about. Okay, so he's 95 years old.
Yeah.
We had to know he was going to die soon, right?
Yeah, the writing was on the wall about 6 months ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is it about somebody who's lived a good, long, well-lived life, when they pass away, it hits us so hard?
Because we think they're immortal.
Yeah.
We think they're as immortal as their creations. When Johnny Cash died,
yeah,
man, that was like, he, like Lee, he's the guy. Cash transcended all genres of everything. He was in everything. Yeah, he was a singer-songwriter, storyteller, but he transcended everything. And Stan Lee was the same way. He was ubiquitous. He was everywhere. He was in everything. He created characters that. The thing about the Marvel universe is between the comics and the movies and the merchandise and the video games and all that and the toys, it almost feels like we're living in their world. Like any minute we could turn on the TV and there'd be or go on Yahoo and there'd be a news article about Spider-Man, fighting Dr. Octopus, or they just seem that real. And that was another thing he did was in DC, for instance, if a character drove a car, as he put it, it was a whiz bang 5000 was the name. But in the Marvel books, like the Human Torch, after he was denied a bank loan, comes back to the Baxter Building and he's driving like a Corvette, and that's what that is.
Yeah. And
he sunk the characters in New York City and real places in the world. You could look up on a map and find the address where Peter Parker's house was. So he ground it all in there, and I think that's what kind of like the thing about the transcendence. It goes both ways. I think that's what it is. I think we think they're immortal because they're so everywhere.
Yeah.
So they have such huge influences on us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Meet the sulky, over-bulky, kinda hulky superhero. A two-fisted and electrically transistored superhero. An exotically neurotic and aquatic superhero. The Marvel superheroes have arrived. Superpowered from the forehead to the toes. Watch them change their very shape before your nose. See arcane-striking superhero change to Viking superhero. A humdinging, real swinging, shield-flinging superhero. They're the latest, they're the greatest, ultimatest superheroes. The Marvel Superheroes.
Well, he'll. I got to do my famous. Well, he'll be missed. Okay. I got no idea what's coming up next week. We're getting pretty close to Christmas, though, and we'll have to start planning out our super special Christmas live show.
Yeah,
which I'm assuming we're going to do.
I'm down for it.
Yeah,
and maybe during the live show, we could announce our plans for next year's super Christmas special.
Right, which may or may not be well before Christmas.
The target is Christmas.
Right. We both have so much going that it's trying to fit it all in. Well, it's one of the joys of life. Oh, speaking of comic books, big shout out to Jim McLean. I don't know if he listens.
Sometimes, yeah.
But he does that thing. He does that thing that makes me feel. Okay, I'm going to flip this up. I'm going to flip this upside down. Makes me feel a deep sense of gratitude. That's what it does. Mm-hmm. Just a package shows up in the mail. We met him at the Comic-Con in
the Hall of Heroes in South Bend.
Yeah,
yeah,
Elkhart.
Elkhart. Yeah,
Elkhart, where they make the saxophones and RVs. Yeah, so we ran into him there, and I know he's a math teacher, and I know that he writes a book or has a book called The Solution Squad,
and he's working with. He and I are working on a book together too, as well. Yeah,
Poe and the Mysteryheads.
Yep.
And so it was great meeting him, and I mentioned to him that our fifth grader was having trouble with math facts, so he gives me these dice, and I'm like, I know I should pay him for them, but I got enough for a beer left. And see, beer, do the right thing. Beer, do the right thing. So I don't think he expected any money for him, but and he tells me about this game that we can play, and she loves it. We've been playing this game.
Yeah.
She loves playing it. So then she's really into the Baby Mouse graphic novels. I don't know if you know about those.
Yeah, we've talked about them, yeah.
Yeah. And she's read some of Spider-Girl, which you got her. So we're sitting around, and this package shows up, and I'm like, oh, a package. I don't know what this is. I was like, from Jim McLean. I was like, oh, I know what this is. I open it up, and it's a hardback copy of Solution Squad. I'm like, oh, man, that motherfucker.
Yeah.
So anyway, big thanks to him. She read it from cover to cover. We just got it like Sunday or Monday. She finished it by Tuesday evening. And I just went in there tonight before I came in here to record. And she's laying there reading it again. And she's like, I decided I should probably read it again.
That's good.
It's like, okay.
That's good.
So I don't know if it's because it's a comic or because she's learning or because she just loves the story. But whatever it is, she's reading it. So
the answer to that question is yes.
Yes. So it's pretty awesome. So thanks to Jim. And if it weren't for Stan Lee, none of that ever would have happened.
Exactly.
And so for Stan Lee, for Paul Schultz, for Jim McLean, I'm Steve Benson, and nothing you just heard was true. Was true. Was true.
That's what we keep inside our heads. That's what we keep inside our heads.
think you know people, and then you don't. Then you wonder, have I met them before? But it doesn't matter. You're just information. That's what we keep inside our heads.